Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and you have seen the developing events happening in Baltimore, which I would argue are virtually unprecedented, at least over the last 40 years. There have been numerous clashes with police. Between the police and the protesters, and it's getting interesting. And some would say getting dangerous. Some would say it's certainly a moment to remember and a moment to really understand. So to understand this moment, I literally reached out at 10:30 at night, well 10:30 Chicago time, 11:30 Eastern, to
11:30.
yes to to Dr. Chanel Jones. Dr. Jones is a respected, highly respected criminologist at the Ohio Dominican University, and she just provides really good analysis on these issues that involve citizens and the police. And so, first, I want to ask Dr. Jones, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm, of course, upset about what's going on, these images that I have seen on the news. And so that's why when you reached out, I said, definitely we have to go. We have to get on here and say something about this.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you taking the time to bring your expertise to the people, because a lot of times the scholars will just talk to each other, but won't talk to the world. I know your time is short, so I want to get right into it. When you say that you've been disturbed by what you've been seeing, can you describe that a little bit? What's going on in your mind?
Oh, there are so many things going on in my mind. So I'm disturbed. I don't know if you've seen, some of the images and whatnot on the media. There are buildings literally burning. There are clashes between the police and the public. People are upset. We're upset about the death of Freddie Gray, who was in police custody when he died. There's still no answers around that. Upset about just the way the city has handled it. Apparently, there was a delay actually until police were dispatched to the area. So there was an opportunity for this situation to escalate. I think they tried a different approach and it sort of backfired. So now we got city administrators getting some criticism and flack because of that. But I think, when we look at these images of the riots and we understand, we see the rioters, what has been really just bothering and troubling my spirit is how everyone is vilifying the rioters. Now we have rioters, we have protesters, we have looters, and what we are seeing is violence. We're seeing perpetual violence being demonstrated across the city of Baltimore right now. But I have a colleague who is actually in Baltimore, and as soon as I saw this, I called her and I said, hey, just checking in, want to see how you're doing, how's everything. Found out she's literally 2 blocks from where all of the demonstrations and everything were being conducted and what's still going on right now. And not only that, she said she can look outside of her window, her home, and see the CVS that was actually set on fire. So she's kind of in the thick of things. So of course, I wanted to make sure she was safe and she's doing okay. But what she said is just amazing. She's a professor, and she's also a criminologist. And she says, you know what? I'm upset. My students are upset. My colleagues are upset. But this has been something that has been building up in the city of Baltimore for the last 20 plus years. She says, so I'm not surprised. And when she said that, that's when I had to just take a step back because I was, of course, upset about the riot. And we never want to see somebody destroying a city, all that money and whatnot. But when she said that, that just kind of changed my perspective. And not only that, she said, the news keeps covering the riots and these violent protests and demonstrations, but there are peaceful protests that are happening all across the city that we are not seeing covered in the media. So that's the other issue that I have about that. And when I look at how when she mentioned, going back to what she said about the city of Baltimore having just this historical problem with police and whatnot going on. So, I went and looked, and literally over the last 4 years, I don't know how many people know, but there have been some 100 individuals, different individuals who have been paid some form of settlement, totaling somewhere around $5.7 million. That taxpayer dollars have been paid out because of the things that Baltimore police officers have done to the public and the violence that they have inflicted on the public. So what we see here, and we have to understand, is that when we see these riots and we see the stuff that's going on in Baltimore, it is not happening in a vacuum. This is the culmination of a history of violence being perpetuated against these communities. And people have reached a boiling point to the to the point where they're just fed up. And we have to understand that when we look at the riots, I always say we look at the riots, and most people, my Facebook timeline, I'm a social media person, so my Facebook timeline is so divided. And I say there is clearly an intellectual divide because I have some people, all my other colleagues and criminologists, they're saying, okay, we need to understand the reason behind the riots, what's causing this. And then I have the other side of my Facebook just calling people thugs and stupid and really, demonizing the people who are in Baltimore. And I'm like, none of us live there. We don't understand the history of the problem there. And, if we were to take this on a macro level scale, the United States has a history of perpetuating violence against communities of color. And we can take that back to the Atlanta race riots. We can look at Tulsa, Oklahoma. We can look at the Washington, D.C. riots. All of this, and we can look at the countless lynchings and murders and all of this violence being inflicted against communities of color. And everybody is silent. Sometimes we forget to, think about that. But let the oppressed come to a point where they say, I am fed up. I am tired of this. And they really have no other way to bring attention to their plight. And so they go and start rioting, and we call it civil disobedience, whatever you want. Then that's when we're going to call them thugs. We're going to say they have a problem. Why haven't we been saying the same thing against the state, who have historically been inflicting violence against these communities of color? That's where we need to start. We need to look at the root cause of the problem. Where did these communities learn this violence? Well, because the violence was inflicted upon them in the first place. And so, a lot of this came into perspective after I had this conversation with my colleague, and she started listing off, these people who have been brutalized by Baltimore police. And, we have Freddie Gray, who's the most recent case, right? But then there's also Trayvon Scott, there's Tyrone West, there is George King, there's Anthony Anderson, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And these are just Baltimore situations, Baltimore incidents. And so, when she just put everything into perspective, that just made me take a step back and say, okay, we have a systemic problem with Baltimore and the Baltimore Police Department. And until that culture changes, then they will continue to have these problems. And what they need to do is get to the root cause of this issue and start to change that culture. Police training, look at police implicit biases, how that may govern how we interact with different people, how it may govern how the police interact with the community. I don't know. But there are so many other issues that led up to this event and what's going on right now. And of course, we never want to see people be violent. We don't want to see buildings being burned down. We don't want to see people waging war, getting upset, and being violent to the police officers. They're there to protect and serve, right? That's what they're supposed to do. And so it's heartbreaking to see. And it was just heartbreaking watching the news media and just seeing how all of this is played out. And so, I was just really upset, really disturbed by many of the images that I have seen. And we just need to get to a point where we start to identify the root cause of the problem and then work to fix and address the root cause of that issue. And so that's where I am. I'm trying to go a little bit deeper instead of just labeling the rioters and the protesters thugs and criminals and all of that. And we need to say, okay, what is going on here? What caused this? And how then do we fix this? And so that's my little two pieces on that.
I think that that was a four-piece meal, and that was exactly what I wanted from you because I think it's important to hear from you as a criminologist and as a black woman and also as a human being. Because I think all those dimensions have to play a role in our scholarship and our analysis of things like this. And one thing that's interesting to me, Dr. Jones, and I want to get your take on this, is you kind of see this this consistent dehumanization that occurs, which almost makes brutal police tactics that much more difficult of a pill to swallow. Meaning, for example, if you think about what happened in Tulsa when the brother accidentally got shot, when the guy tried to tase him, but he shot him instead, and he said, "I'm losing my breath," and the officer said, "Fuck your breath." You remember Eric Garner when he was on the ground saying, "I can't breathe." They didn't even administer CPR to him. They didn't want to touch him. I've heard stories about guys in prison. In fact, what's the brother? This Daryl Pageant, a brother I respect, who did 40 years in prison, or he got a 40-year sentence for possession of 1 gram of crack cocaine. And he said that in his cell, that when the guy was dying, the officer was supposed to administer CPR, and he looked at him and said, "Do CPR," and the guy said, I'm not doing that," And so it's almost as, and then I think the final kicker is, you just heard this. I don't know if you saw this story today, but there was a story that came out maybe a day or two ago where the FBI accidentally put an innocent man in prison for 20 years because they mistook his hair for the hair of a dog. They took a
I
dog.
did.
They analyzed a dog's hair instead of his hair, and then when you dig into this lab, you find out that they've been putting dozens, or if not hundreds, of people in prison that didn't deserve to be there because their analysis was flawed. It was heavily biased toward the prosecution. So what I'm really seeing here is the continuation of a trend. Because remember, it started in slavery. I mean, slavery, we were legally 3/5 of a human being, but even after slavery, there's just this idea that we're not quite human, that we don't quite feel pain, that we don't deserve the same respect, that we could be lying there on the ground dying, and they don't have to give us CPR because they know they can get away with it. And it seems that that might be part of what could just drive this anger to the point where people like you and I, here we are, we're hoity-toity Negroes with our PhDs and our nice homes and all that, right? But even us can look out we can look out the window and see, they're burning down the CVS pharmacy, and even though you don't want to see stuff burn, there's a part of you that's kind of saying, well, it's about time. It's about time we fight fire with fire or something, because it's getting out of hand. And then it actually, that leads to that second question. And then I want you to talk. It seems that every time there is the most unbelievable, undeniable brutality thrust upon black people, the first thing we hear are from these people, these civil rights organizations and leaders that pop out of nowhere, who always say, "Be peaceful, be calm." Well, how can you be peaceful and be calm when war has been declared upon you? When someone bombs the United States, when they bombed Pearl Harbor, when they bombed the Trade Center, were we peaceful and calm? Like, what if someone had said, "Just let's be peaceful and calm"? Do you think people would have responded to that? No, they wouldn't have. So, what is your take on all of this? On all of us, all that I said. I'm not even going to ask it as a question. I just want to get your take on this.
Well, I think it's just the assumption that black people, when violence and brutality is inflicted upon them, they're just supposed to bow down and take it. Why? Because they are dehumanized. They don't feel pain. They don't understand it. So it's that assumption. Hey, we can continue to treat you like this, and you're supposed to be passive. You're supposed to be just take it, take it, take it. But that can only last but so long, and people at some point in time get fed up. And I think, we are kind of at this, tipping point here where people are starting to be more conscious. They're starting to be more aware, and they're understanding we're not going to take this anymore, and something needs to change. You can't have a criminal justice system. I mean, the word itself, justice, and it's not just. That is a problem. And, when you have these prosecutors they have flawed mechanisms of, determining, or when they do the process for like the DNA sample and that sort of thing. And we're locking up black men, we're locking up black women for 20 plus years. And then, we're just, oops, my bad, we made a mistake, and thinking that that's okay. That's not okay. And people can only deal with that for so long. You can't keep killing African Americans and black men and women. And that's another thing. I'm segueing into something else here. But we always hear about black men who are being killed by police, and you rarely hear about black women. There are a lot of black women who are also brutalized and killed by police officers. You don't hear about that much. Why? Because we're dealing with intersectionality. Then you got being a woman, being black. She's definitely not supposed to feel anything, so she's not even that important enough. She's invisible to highlight her story. So we have all of these issues with the criminal justice system. And, there is this notion, you talked about it being 3/5 of a person, and there's still that idea that, hey, we are less than, we are not equal to. And because of that, we can treat this segment of the population anyway. And I think at some point, this segment, communities of color, African Americans, they're just, they're just tired. And when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and, you went out, you marched, you did the, next best thing, I don't know, they decide we're going to destroy the city until somebody recognizes that we have a problem here and we need to do something about it.
Wow. Well, I know you got to go, and I got one more question I want to ask you about, and this is because this goes more to your criminal justice expertise in terms of, police and how they operate and things that they can do and how bad it can get. I don't know if you saw this video, but there's a video of protesters throwing rocks and bricks at the police, and the police are retreating. I mean, people are literally chasing the police and throwing stuff at them. Did you see that by chance?
Yeah, and then I saw the one with the police officer also throwing bricks throwing rocks and bricks back.
Yeah,
Also, did you
well,
see that?
yeah. Well, I didn't see that one. I didn't see, and honestly, I'm used to seeing police, shooting off tear gas and rubber bullets and all that. So it was kind of interesting to see that people
Mm.
were so upset that they were chasing the police literally. And what I've always thought about is something that you've heard people allude to from time to time, almost like it was a fantasy, but now some of that's becoming real. You've had people who've said, "Look, not only have you disenfranchised entire communities, an entire segment of the population, these are the children whose parents you put in prison for 30, 40 years, so many of them may not have role models, to help them find other ways to express their frustration, right? You've dropped drugs and guns in these communities, so they've become immune to violence. Many of them have been traumatized by having friends who've been victims of violence. Some of them may have perpetrated the violence, depending on who you are. I'm talking about specifically, for example, if you talk about gang members, the Crips and the Bloods, and I'm bringing them up for a reason. So you got these guns and drugs in the community. People were okay selling us guns as long as we were killing each other, and it only takes the strength of the Nation of Islam to step in and talk to the Crips and Bloods in Baltimore, which is what they did, and say, instead of fighting each other, this is your enemy. Right? That's where a Farrakhan type person becomes very dangerous, because he says, look, don't channel that aggression at each other. If you're gonna be aggressive, here's your war. Right? So as a result of this, for the first time in quite a while, the Nation of Islam has actually worked with the Crips and the Bloods in Baltimore to get them to protest together by any means necessary. So you're getting real Malcolm X with it, which honestly I don't have a problem with, given that the brutality has been so bad. So you've seen more aggression than you've seen almost anywhere else. I'm curious to ask you this, and this is where I want your expertise to step in. We've seen the National Guard being called in. How bad can this get? I mean, if people continue to be that aggressive and they pour more and more resources into this situation, I mean, what's going to happen as this escalates into a war zone? I mean, what should we be afraid of in terms of the state's response to this kind of protest?
Well, my hope is that it doesn't escalate into a war zone. And, they are calling National Guard in because they're trying to get civil order. I believe they've called on some 5,000 additional officers who are also around that area, to come in and help bring the city back to order. And, what we don't want to see, at least what I do not want to see, is, we have the community against the police. This is not what we want. The police and the community should be working together. That's why we have community oriented policing services. That's why we have that office through the Department of Justice. It's to bring the communities and the policing together so both entities can work to fight crime and to improve communities. We can't pit one against the other and think that's going to solve the problem. We can't put the police against the community against the police. That's not going to fix anything. At some point, we need to bring parties, to the table, and both have to be open and receptive to substantive change. The communities have to be willing to work with the police, but if they do that, then we need to, the police, they can't be brutalizing the community. We can't have the community, throwing rocks at the police. We can't have police officers killing people in the community. We need both parties to come together, because if we don't, then what we will see, they said it's not a state of lawlessness, but we will see complete chaos here. And that is not what we want. That is not what I guess this nation was built upon. I don't know, but that's definitely not what I want to see. What we still have, Baltimore, there are people that live there. There are residents that live there. Like I said, my colleague is there, and she's just like, sorry, that was my dog. A
No,
colleague
it's
was
okay.
there, and she's just like, send up your prayers for us. We just need the whole nation to pray for us. And my heart just goes out to her because she can look down the street and see, her community is being destroyed. And that's not what we want, but it takes everybody to come together at some point. We cannot keep, you know, drawing a fist and another person drawing a fist. That's not going to help anything. We need both parties to come together and work to improve the situation.
Mm.
And so that's what I think. And when that's going to happen, I don't know. Will it get worse tomorrow? Probably. But and the days after, it's going to take a couple of days before all of this settles down. And after that, hopefully we're able to actually come to some point where we change the culture of the Baltimore Police Department. There's probably just a few bad police officers there that, we need to help or, I don't know, get rid of or do something with. But at some point, something's got to give, something's got to change.
Yes, it has to, and let's hope that they are able to work with the community. I mean, I think that that's been a consistent problem. You see police departments that are really hesitant to change,
Right.
even when there's clear evidence that they're overstepping their boundaries, and you can't have people there living in a police state because, as you said, I mean, it could descend into chaos, but then the next thing that follows chaos is some sort of martial law or whatever, which is just even worse. So I want to say thank you so much, Dr. Jones, for taking the time from grading finals to talk to me about this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Anytime, anytime.
All right, everybody. This is Dr. Chanel Jones. She is an amazing criminologist at Ohio Dominican University, right down the street from another great scholar by the name of Michelle Alexander. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. And by the way, don't forget, we have a new film out called Resurrecting Black Wall Street about the Black Wall Street atrocity in 1921, the story that has been buried for 100 years. And we want every black child in America to know this story. And we also want every black adult in America to know how the story needs to continue in the 21st century, because we can build a Black Wall Street in every community. So if you want to check out the trailer and support the film, please go to resurrectingblackwallstreet.com. That's resurrectingblackwallstreet.com. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.